Hey there, Bible nerds. Welcome back to Chapters and Chuckles by Kaye, where we dive into the Bible chapter by chapter. Have you ever wondered what would happen if God Himself designed your yearly planner, complete with holidays, meal plans, and financial resets? This is Leviticus episode 3, the final episode for the Leviticus series. We're going to cover chapters 19 I can't talk, 19 through 27. If you have stuck with me through animal sacrifices, mysterious strange fire mishaps, and lots of laws about what's clean or unclean, give yourself a round of applause because I sure am giving myself one. We are in our final stretch. As I have said, this is the final episode. So go ahead and grab your drink, get comfy, and let's dive in. Chapter 19. Be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. With that thunderous opening, this chapter launches a rapid fire list of do's and don'ts for living a holy life. Picture Moses addressing the assembled Israelites, reading off God's very detailed holiness code like a divine checklist. Everyone leans in, expecting lofty religious rituals, but God starts with everyday stuff because it's the little things that matter, really. So, respect your parents and keep the Sabbath. So, mom, dad, and rest days get top billing. Another one, no idols allowed. So, ditch those little golden calves, your your pictures of the celebrities that you love on your wall, things like that. Those are all forms of idolism, honestly. Um, Another one, when you offer a sacrifice of well-being, do it properly. Eat it within 2 days. Or else that third day casserole is too old and must be burned. Nobody likes rotten potluck leftovers, God included. Also, God took into consideration the fact that that time they didn't have, fridges or anything to store food to help it, last longer. So that's why, so God thinks about everything. Another one, the care for the poor. Farmers were commanded to leave parts of their harvest behind for the poor and foreigners, a built in system of generosity and community care. There is honesty and fair pay. So God forbade stealing, lying, or using his name to back deceit. Employers had to pay workers promptly and fairly. Another one, compassion and respect. The Israelites were to treat the disabled and elderly with dignity, no mocking, mistreatment, or disrespect. The last one, fair justice. Everyone was to be judged impartially, without favoritism toward rich or poor. Gossip and slander and plotting harm were all banned. True holiness meant everyday integrity. So, as Moses relays these commands, there's a refrain after many of them. I am the Lord. It's like it's like God's divine signature after each point, reminding everyone who's boss. Every fine line, Moses intones, I am the Lord, and the crowd murmurs, yes, yes, sir, understood. It's both reassuring and a little like hearing your parents say, because I said so, that's why. Oh, I do say that all the time to my daughter. So then comes a big one. A rule so important it later gets quoted by a famous Galilean um, thousands of years later, and says, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." So yes, Nestled among laws about farming and festivals is this golden rule, which is in Leviticus 19, verse 18. Imagine the people's surprise. Holiness isn't just fancy worship, it's treating each other with love and respect. God essentially says, no grudges, no revenge, instead, practice neighborly love. You can almost hear a collective, like, whoa, as this sinks in. Now, lest we think it's all warm and fuzzy, chapter chapter 19 also throws in some distinctly ancient rules to keep Israel set apart. So there's four. One is symbolic purity. Israelites were forbidden from mixing seeds, breeding animals across kinds, or wearing blended fabrics, which unfortunately we do a lot of this now in this current day and age. We breed animals, across kinds. Well, like we have crossbred dogs. We also mix and blend our fabrics. There's even clothes with two different kinds of like fabrics in it. You know what I mean? Like blended cotton or blended things. This is a very common thing that we do now. And sometimes it can't be helped because like specific kinds of fabrics are also pricey, unfortunately. Anyway, second one is reject pagan practices. No eating blood, fortune telling, ritual haircuts, or tattooing for the dead. These separated Israel from surrounding occult or pagan customs. And there's moral and social integrity. So exploitation was banned, even of of your own kid, your own daughter, or your own family. You cannot exploit your own family. That is banned. The Sabbath observance is reinforced, and God commanded kindness to foreigners. Treat them like natives, remembering Israel's own past as stranger in Egypt. This is something that, unfortunately, my country currently does not believe in. Anyway, I digress. Lastly, business honesty. Merchants had to use fair weights and measures. Economic integrity was part of holiness too. FYI. So by the end of this chapter, Moses is probably hoarse from talking. I do feel like that right now, even though it's only been like 8 minutes. It's too early for me right now. I haven't even had. Well, actually, I've had a coffee, but I don't think it really worked. So, but you know what? I can do this. So, the Israelites has are spinning with all these instructions. But the message is clear. Holiness isn't just about sacrifice and priests, it's about everyday goodness, fairness, and love. This chapter is a beautiful mashup of commands that cover everything from worship to work ethic to personal grooming. God is shaping Israel into a community that's just compassionate and distinct from their neighbors. All right, fun fact corner. Love your neighbor origin. So the famous command quoted by Jesus as the second greatest commandment originates here in Leviticus 19, verse 18. Like, who would have thought the book known for laws is the source of such a profound ethic of love? This book is usually the one that the people skip because, again, it's boring. And I admit I'm one of those people that every time I read through the Bible, I skip, a few books. And this is one of those books that I tend to um skip. But yeah, so that famous love your neighbor command is, you know, originated from this book. And that is it for chapter 19. Okay, chapter 20. If chapter 19 was the kindly do the right thing speech, chapter 20 is the stern or else follow up. So here, God lays out the penalties for the gravest offenses. And spoiler alert, many of them are capital crimes. Ancient Israel did not mess around. Moses likely, with a somber tone, relays each judgment. The community probably listens with wide eyes and occasional gulp. The chapter opens with a big do not. So no sacrificing your children to Molech. Molech was a detestable Canaanite deity, and apparently some folks might be tempted to appease him by literally offering their kids as burnt offerings. Can you believe? But you know what? At this point, just based from everything that I know in the Bible, I'm not even surprised on the things that people are capable of. Um, so God says anyone who does that must be stoned to death by the community. And if the community ignores such an atrocity, God Himself will take matters into His own hands against that person and their family. In short, child sacrifice equals automatic expulsion, or worse. Understandably, it's hard to be holy if you're burning babies. Major yikes. So, no occult dealings. If anyone turns to mediums or wizards, or what are they called nowadays? Um, I don't know what they're called. There's those people who do horoscopes and all that. I'm blanking. Anyways, don't turn to those people. And God said, I will set my face against that person and cut them off. Seeking out, Miss Cleo or Miss Rain in a tent isn't just frowned upon, it's a spiritual betrayal with severe consequences. In ancient Israel, dabbling in the occult was essentially treason against God's covenant. Then we get a rapid list of crimes and their punishments, and they are heavy. Imagine Moses reading each line, and the crowd winces at each, shall be put to death. Like hearing, you know, what's the thing in the courtroom? The thingy gavel, is that what it's called? um, yeah, it's kind of like you're hearing that in a courtroom. So I'm just gonna go ahead and enumerate those um list. First one is cursing parents. Disrespecting or cursing one's father or mother was a capital offense, emphasizing how serious God viewed honoring parents. Adultery. Both the man and the woman caught in adultery were to be executed, reinforcing the importance of marital faithfulness as the foundation of family life. Incest and forbidden relations. Sexual relations with close relatives, stepmother, daughter in law, sister, aunt, etc. Or perverse union, like man with woman and her mother, were labeled abomination and perversions, most carrying the death penalty or divine judgment like childlessness. Bestiality. Any sexual act with an animal was punishable by death for both human and animals to eliminate such unnatural corruption completely. Lastly, general principle. These laws drew sharp moral boundaries meant to preserve the holiness, order, and purity of Israel's community. All these laws sound super strict, and they are. They should be, but they serve to protect the community's integrity and distinctiveness. The refrain, "Their blood shall be upon them," pops up very often, meaning the guilt on the perpetrators. The society is just carrying out justice, not murder. So after laying down the law, literally, God gives a motivational pep talk of sorts, saying, "You shall therefore keep all my statutes, that the land where I am bringing you may not vomit you out." Yeah, that is a pep talk. Like, yeah, vomit you out. Gross imagery, but very effective. It's like God saying, if you do these vile things, even the promised land will be sick of you and spit you out, just like it's doing to the current inhabitants. The Canaanites, who Israel will replace, were infamous for exactly these kinds of practices. Hence why these specific prohibitions are listed. So God always makes sense. He thinks of everything, the logistics and such, everything. He's just he's just so wise. So God continues, I have separated you from the people. You shall be holy to me, for I, the Lord, am holy, and I have separated you from the other peoples to be mine. So all these severe rules have a purpose, keeping Israel separate from special or separate and special for God. Finally, one more death penalty reminder. Mediums and spiritists. Yeah, so God already said don't go to them. Now he adds a man or woman who is a medium or wizard shall purely be put to death. They shall be stoned with stones. Case closed on the occult. So by the end of this chapter, the Israelites are probably sitting in stunned silence. It's a heavy chapter, essentially a crime and punishment code for the theocracy. The tone is deadly serious, pun intended, very, very pun intended, but it drives home. God's covenant has high stakes. Israel can't just do whatever the neighboring nations do. They're called to do a higher standard under penalty of each or a penalty of death or exile for for these sins. And as I've said, like we can't just do whatever our neighbors are doing. It's funny because I say this to my daughter all the time when she's doing something, and her excuse is that, oh, because everybody's doing it, or because this and that. And I always tell her, just because the other kid is doing it doesn't mean that you should be doing it too. So yeah, I tell her that all the time because she gets peer pressured. I mean, even adults are peer pressured all the time. More so kids because they think what other kids are doing are cool or whatever, so they want to do it too. They want to partake. They want to do all of that, and I have to tell her all the time. You got to teach them young, of course, and but yeah, and this is something that I have to keep saying and doing over and over. Um, and hopefully it will stick. But yeah, just because other people are doing it doesn't mean that it is good, and doesn't mean that you should be doing it as well. All right, I digress. So this chapter shows just how serious God is about protecting family life and worship from corruption. Like reading it now, the death penalties sound shocking, but I feel like these should still be because after the New Testament, a lot of these laws from Leviticus are no longer no longer apply. But sometimes I do wish that a lot of these still apply to this day and age. But it is what it is. Yeah. So but in that time and context, they underscored during that time they underscored the gravity of these sins. It was a stark way to say these behaviors destroy souls and society. They have no place among God's people. All right, fun fact corner. Molech, the forbidden idol. Who or what was Molech? Molech was a deity worshipped by neighboring places like the Ammonites, often depicted as a bronze statue with outstretched arms. Worshippers would heat it up and sacrifice children into its glowing arms. Can you believe that? Like, no wonder God outlawed it in Israel with extreme prejudice. Like, yeah. Another fact, archaeologists and scholars debate how widespread this practice was, but the Bible uses Moloch as the ultimate example of pagan cruelty. The valley of Topheth near Jerusalem was later infamous for such sacrifice as well, and it became a symbol for hell. So, chapter 20's first law isn't random, it strikes a real dark practice God wanted to eliminate entirely. And that is it for chapter 20. And it's only been like 20 minutes. Wow. All right, chapter 21. This chapter centers on the strict standards God set for the priests, um, showing that serving in his presence required both outward and inward holiness. Priests were forbidden from touching dead bodies, since doing so made a person ritually unclean. They could only make exceptions for immediate family members, but the high priest was not allowed to attend any funerals at all, not even for his parents. Wow. So his service to God came before all personal or social duties. So you gotta literally give up everything, if you know, to be a high priest. It was, life of complete devotion, even in moments of sorrow. But you also have to remember that we will all end up in God's kingdom anyway, so we will see each other there anyways. So if you just want to think on the bright side of things during that time. The priests also had to maintain a distinct appearance and avoid pagan mourning practices. They couldn't shave bald spots on their heads, trim the edges of their beards, or cut their bodies, customs associated with idol worship. God wanted his priests to look different, setting them apart visually as servants of Yahweh, not imitators of neighboring religions. Their outward appearance reflected their inner calling to holiness and reverence. Marriage standards were equally strict. Regular priests could not marry prostitutes or divorced women, while the high priest could only marry a virgin from his own people. This wasn't about, being elite, but about maintaining purity and avoiding scandal in the priestly family line. The priest's household symbolized holiness, and any defilement, moral or social, was seen as dishonoring God. Even more sobering, if a priest's daughter became a prostitute, she was to be executed by fire for disgracing her father's sacred office. It showed how seriously God viewed the priest's responsibility to model holiness in both ministry and family, which, like, that should still be a thing now. If you are a pastor, a priest, a minister, a leader of, some kind of a leader religiously, um you should also be a good example in your family as well, because a lot of family will come to you to seek advice and all of that. And what makes you credible if you can't even take care of your own family? You know what I mean? So lastly, only physically unblemished priests could serve at the altar. Men with deformities or diseases were not allowed to perform sacrifices. So this wasn't discrimination, it symbolized the perfection of wholeness that God's holiness demanded. The priest, like the sacrifice he offered, had to be without defect as a teaching image of spiritual completeness before God. By the end of the chapter, Aaron and his sons had received a heavy but clear message. Um, Being a priest was not just a job, it's a lifestyle of separation, reverence, and example. No impurity, whether physical, moral, or symbolic, could be tolerated in the service of a perfect God. The priests were living reminders of God's holiness among his people. Hey, fun fact corner. No funeral for high priest. So the high priest could not attend even his own parents' funerals, as mentioned. Jewish tradition says if someone close to the high priest died, others would handle the burial. This may sound heartless, but it underscores how the high priest's life was fully dedicated to God's presence. Interestingly, later on, some high priests did bend the rules, of course. But at this point in history, the ideal was total devotion. And that is it, folks, for chapter 21. All right, chapter 22, continuing the focus on priests. So, this chapter outlines how priests must handle holy offerings and, importantly, who is allowed to eat the sacrificial food. Picture a sign in the priestly cafeteria saying authorized personnel only beyond this point. So, this chapter is all about keeping the holy things holy and avoiding the unfortunate mix ups like a random Israelite snacking on the priest portion of sacrifices. Um, First off, God tells Aaron and sons to be careful with the sacred donation from the people so as not to profane his holy name. If a priest is ritually unclean, he must not eat from the offerings until he's clean again. We get a list of possible scenarios that make a priest unclean, such as touching a corpse, having an emission of semen, touching an unclean animal or insect, or any other impurities. If it happens, the priest has to go through the usual purification before partaking in holy food. If a priest were to eat holy offerings while unclean, it's a serious offense. He'd be cut off from God's presence. In short, wash your hands and heart before coming to God's dinner table. Cleanliness is next to godliness, literally. Also, priests cannot eat any animal that died naturally or was torn by beasts, like roadkill. That's a definite no. Um, not only would that make them unclean, but it's just not fitting for someone in God's service to be eating carrion like a vulture. So, no snacking on that expired deer you found. Next, this chapter clarifies who gets to eat the holy offerings that people bring. Only the priest and his household get to eat them. This includes his wife, children, and any slave servants that are part of his household. So, yes, the priest could have servants who were considered part of the family unit. They too could share in the holy food. If a priest's daughter marries an outsider, for example, someone not a priest, she can no longer eat the sacred offerings. When she's married into a non priestly family, she doesn't get the priestly pantry privileges. But if the daughter is widowed and divorced with no kids and she returns to live with daddy priest like in her youth, she regains the right to eat of the holy food. It's like reinstating her membership card at the holy buffet. Basically, priestly provision is for those under the priest's roof and care. Um, no lay person is allowed to munch on the sacred donation. If some regular Joe accidentally eats a holy offering, maybe he grabbed the wrong rose from the fridge, he must reimburse the priest with an added 20% as a penalty. So if you accidentally ate Father Aaron's sanctified lamb chop, you owe him equivalent plus a bit extra. That will teach folks to label their foods clearly. All these regulations ensure that the offerings dedicated to God are treated with respect and only used by those authorized. It also protects the sacred system from careless mistakes or abuses. The second half of this chapter shifts focus to the offering themselves. What kind of animals are acceptable as sacrifices? Uh, to be accepted, an animal sacrifice must be perfect without blemish. That means no injuries, no deformities, no diseases. The Bible text lists examples of unacceptable flaws, like no blind animals, no broken bones, no guts, no skin diseases or sores, etc. You wouldn't serve your boss a moldly hamburger, so don't bring a God a limping goat. You know what I mean? God deserves the best only, and offering a defective animal would be regifting God your garbage. Hard pass. If anyone tries to offer an animal with a blemish, it will not be accepted in favor. This applies to both Israelites and any sojourners living among them who want to give an offering. The same quality control is in place. There's a note of free will offering as opposed to a vow or required offering could use an animal with some minor disproportions, like if it has a leg longer than the other or something odd like that, and it might still be accepted. But anything for a vow or serious offering had to be 100% primo quality. They really had an ancient inspection system, maybe an early form of USDA Prime. Another one, they are strictly forbidden from offering an animal that has been castrated or otherwise maimed. It even says that do not do such practices, or it says not to do such practices in your land. Another one, another compassionate rule. A newborn animal has to be at least 8 days old before it can be offered. You can't take a baby from its mother the moment it's born and sacrifice it. It needs a week with its mama. So, you know. And in a related rule, you shall not kill the cow or you and her young on the same day. So if you're offering an animal, don't also slaughter its mother or child the same day. There's a thing of mercy and sensitivity in even in sacrifice, honoring the bond of parent and offspring in the animal world. When offering a Thanksgiving sacrifice, it must be eaten the same day with no leftovers kept till morning. This repeats a rule from earlier. God really likes fresh offerings, not next day carryouts. All right, that is it for, well, fun fact corner. Let's do fun fact. The 20% tithe penalty, the adding of one fifth or 20% when making restitution or redeeming something appears several times in Leviticus, including here in this chapter. So it's like a built in interest or penalty fee. For instance, if you accidentally enjoy the priest's holy steak, not only do you replace it, you add 20% more as a way of saying sorry in tangible terms. This concept of adding a fifth was a common restitution measure, showing that making things right often means going the extra mile, or in this case, extra shekel. And that is it, folks, for chapter 22. All right, chapter 23. Get ready to mark your calendars because this chapter is basically Israel's official holiday schedule. If you thought religion was all about rules and no fun, think again. God institutes a series of feasts and sacred days that will punctuate Israel's year with time of rest, remembrance, and rejoicing. And yes, some serious reflection too. It's like God saying, by the way, here are all your long weekends and festival seasons. Enjoy, but keep them holy. So, in this chapter lays out Israel's sacred calendar, a rhythm of worship, rest, and celebration that shaped the nation's year. God begins with Sabbath, the weekly day of rest and worship. Every 7 days, work stopped completely. Families gathered, people rested, and God's people were reminded that life wasn't all about labor. It was a holy pause, a built in rhythm of renewal that kept Israel centered on the Creator. Next came the Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread. Celebrated in early spring, Passover commemorated the night God delivered Israel from Egypt. When the angel of death passed over their blood marked doors, it was immediately followed by a week long feast of unleavened bread, a time to eat flat bread and remember the hassle of their escape. No yeast symbolized cleansing from sin and starting anew. Together, these two observances honored both freedom and faithfulness, God's rescue and Israel's call to live pure before Him. During the same season, they celebrated the offering of first fruits, the first sheaf of the barley harvest presented to God. It was Israel's way of saying, the first and the best belong to you. Before anyone ate from the new crops, they gave thanks to the giver. A few weeks later came the Feast of Weeks, celebrating the wheat harvest 50 days after first fruits. It was a joyful festival of gratitude with offerings of bread and animals, and a reminder that abundance came from God alone. Later, Jewish tradition would connect this day with the giving of the law at Sinai. And in the New Testament, Pentecost became known for the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, a spiritual harvest echoing this same celebration. Then came the autumn festivals. The Feast of Trumpets began the seventh month with a blast, literally. Trumpets sounded across the land to signal reflection and preparation for the coming holy days. It marked the start of Israel's civil new year and later called Rosh Hashanah, and called the people to spiritual wakefulness. 10 days later arrived the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur, the most solemn day of all. On this day, the entire nation fasted, prayed, and repented as the high priest entered the Holy of Holies, to make atonement for Israel's sins. It was a sacred day of confession and cleansing. No work, no food, no humility, or just humility before God. When the sun set, forgiveness was celebrated and peace restored. Finally, on the 15th day of the same month came the Feast of Booths, the grand finale of the festival year. For 7 days, Israel celebrated with great joy, living in temporary shelters made of branches to remember how God sustained them in the wilderness. Families ate, sang, and worshiped under the stars, rejoicing in both harvest, bounty, and God's faithful provision. The eighth day brought one last sacred assembly before everyone turned home, their hearts full and their gratitude renewed. Though these festivals God gave Israel more than religious duties. He gave them a rhythm of life. Each season pointed to His goodness: spring for deliverance and provision, autumn for repentance and rejoicing, and every week for rest and renewal. It was a divine pattern of remembering, worshiping, and celebrating, a calendar of holiness that turned ordinary time into sacred time. It's a full calendar, but a balanced one. Work hard, but also party holy. Ancient Israel is often imagined as somber law keepers, but here we see they had plenty of feasts. God knew the human spirit needs joy and rhythms of celebration. All right, fun fact corner. Still celebrated today. Most of the festivals are still celebrated in Judaism today, often with additional traditions developed with over millennia. Passover is commemorated with a Seder meal each spring. Pentecost is observed by studying Torah all night. The Day of Atonement sees synagogues filled with fasting worshippers seeking forgiveness. And Feast of Booths is celebrated by building sukkahs decorated with lights and fruits. Many Jewish families eat and even sleep in them for a week. It's amazing continuity. Modern people still living out Leviticus 23 each year. All right, that was a quick one. Actually, that wasn't a quick one. That was a long one. But that is it for chapter 23. Okay, we're at 30 minutes and we're only halfway. It's going to be a long episode. Chapter 24. So, this chapter might seem like a grab bag at first. It starts with some ritual details about the tabernacle lamps and bread, then turns to a dramatic courtroom story about blasphemy and justice. Talk about variety. So, let's go ahead and break it down. Part 1: Light and Bread in God's House. So God instructs Moses to tell the Israelites to bring pure olive oil so the lamps in the tabernacle can burn continually. This is the golden lampstand menorah. In the holy place tended by Aaron and his sons. Their job is to make sure the light never goes out, a perpetual ordinance through all generations. Picture it like God's night light, symbolizing His constant presence among His people. It's like God's, what am I trying to say? It's symbolizing His constant presence among His people, as I've said. So even at 2 a.m., some sleepy Levite is refilling oil, ensuring that God's glow never fades. The unending light represents God's holiness, guidance, and the everlasting covenant between Him and Israel. Then comes the bread of the presence. Literally, bread of the face as it sits before God's presence. Moses is to have 12 loaves baked from fine flour, each made with about a fifth of an ephah. Aaron must arrange these 12 loaves in two neat rows, six in each row, on the pure gold table before the Lord. Frankincense displays on each row as a memorial portion, likely burned to. Oh my gosh, I can't talk. Likely burned to produce a fragrant offering to accompany the bread. Every Sabbath, the priests replaced the old loaves with fresh ones, eating the previous week's bread in a holy place. This weekly bread swap symbolizes fellowship between God and the 12 tribes of Israel. The bread represents that all tribes are continually before him, sharing in his table. The lamps and bread together make a powerful picture: light for his presence and bread for his fellowship. God's house always alive, warm, and welcoming. Part 2: The Blasphemer. Suddenly, the story shifts from peaceful worship to a shocking event in the camp. An Israelite man whose mother is Israelite and father is Egyptian gets into a fight with another Israelite. In the heat of the argument, the man blasphemes the name of God and curses aloud. The crowd freezes. Everyone knows the seriousness of this. The name Yahweh is sacred, never to be spoken irreverently, let alone cursed. Witnesses drag the man before Moses, unsure of what to do with such a grave offense. Moses has the man held in custody until God provides a ruling. Then God speaks. The blasphemer must be taken outside the camp, and all who heard him must lay their hands on his head, symbolically transferring the testimony and guilt. Then the entire assembly is to stone him to death. This isn't mob justice, it's a communal act of obedience, ensuring that God's holiness is upheld among the people. Then God instructs Moses to make the law clear for everyone. Everyone who blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. This law applies to both Israelites and foreigners alike. The message is unmistakable. God's name is sacred and words matter. In a world where speech can build or destroy, cursing the Creator Himself is treated as the ultimate rebellion. So, in one chapter, we see two extremes: the light and bread symbolizing ongoing worship and fellowship, and a man who, by his words, rejects the holiness entirely. It's a vivid reminder that God's presence is both comforting and consuming, depending on how we respond. But wait, there's more. God uses this case to reiterate some principles of justice. Anyone who takes a human life shall be put to death. Murder equals capital punishment. This echoes Genesis 9 and later the Ten Commandments principles. Life is sacred. Whoever kills an animal shall make restitution, life for life. If you kill someone's ox, you owe them an ox. You don't get the death penalty for killing animal, but you must compensate fully. If anyone injures their neighbors as he has done, so it shall be done to him. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. This is the famous um Lex Tali Talionis, law of retaliation in kind. It was meant to ensure fairness in punishment. No excessive revenge. The punishment should fit the crime. No more. The law is the same for everyone, foreigners or native. Equality under the law is stressed. One law for all. After laying down these legal principles, Moses and the Israelites carry out the sentence of the blasphemer. They take the man outside camp and stone him to death as commanded. It's a grim, very grim scene. The whole community participates, which underlines that blaspheming God's name is an offense against the entire community's relationship with God. Thus ends the tale of Shelomith's son. So the Bible text even records his mother's name, perhaps highlighting the personal tragedy and warning. So this chapter gave us a little of everything: ritual, symbol, narrative, and law. The lambs and bread part might have lulled us, then boom, a real life example of how seriously God's commandments are upheld. It's a sobering reminder that this covenant life is not a game at all. I don't have any fun facts for this chapter, so that's it for chapter 24. All right, chapter 25. That's when you think Leviticus couldn't surprise you more. This chapter rolls in with one of the most radical social economic ideas in history, the Year of Jubilee. Well, first, it lays the foundation with the concept of the Sabbath year. So, buckle up. This is where God essentially says, how about you take an entire year of off farming every 7 years and trust me to provide. And then after 7 cycles of that, let's have a super year where all debts are forgiven and slaves freed. It's mind blowing, even today. So, Sabbath year. When the Israelites enter the promised land, they won't just have a Sabbath day, they'll have a Sabbath year. Every seventh year, the land itself gets a rest. For 6 years, you may sow your fields, prune your vineyards, and gather crops. But in the seventh year, stop. Do not sow your field or prune your vineyard. Don't harvest what grows by itself, and don't gather the grapes from your untended vine. It's effectively a year long fallow period. The land observes the Sabbath to the Lord. Does that mean no food at all is grown? Not exactly. Whatever comes up naturally can be eaten, but it's open to everyone. The scripture says it's for you, your servants, your hired workers, the foreigners, and even your cattle and wild animals to eat. In other words, whatever pops up is free game for a hungry mouth, like communal food, but no organized farming or profit taking. Can you imagine? This is an agrarian society. Taking a full year off from agriculture sounds insane, but God is teaching reliance. Trust that I'll provide enough in 6 years to carry you through year seven and into year eight harvest. It's a giant faith exercise and is also a brilliant agricultural practice. Letting field rest can restore soil fertility. This is actually very healthy for the soil. So, this Sabbath year also gave people time to focus on other things: family, community, learning the law. It prevented burnout of both land and laborers. It's like God built in an ancient sabbatical concept long before modern academics thought of it. Now, if that wasn't radical enough, here comes the big one: Year of Jubilee. Count off 7 cycles of those Sabbath years. So 7 times 7 is 49. Then the 50th year is special. On the Day of Atonement of year 49, you blow a loud trumpet, which is called shofar, throughout the land, proclaiming the Jubilee starting in the 50th year. Jubilee means ram's horn because of the trumpet, and it's basically the year of liberation. So proclaim liberty. Every 50th year, which is the Jubilee, freedom is declared across the land. Slaves go free, debts are canceled, and land returns to original family owners. No farming in Jubilee, like the Sabbath year. Fields rest during Jubilee, the 2 consecutive years without planting or harvesting, requiring total faith. God promises abundant crops beforehand to sustain them. Divine crop insurance. Land restoration. Land can't be sold permanently because it belongs to God. In Jubilee, all property reverts to its original family, reminding Israel they're tenants on God's land. Property values. Land sales were based on years left until Jubilee. More years, higher price. Fewer years, lower price. This kept transactions fair and prevented economic exploitation. Redemption on land. A relative could buy back sold land to keep it in the family. If not, the seller or his heirs regained it at Jubilee, ensuring no family lost land forever. Um, Exceptions for city property. Houses in walled cities could be permanently sold if not redeemed within a year. Village houses tied to farmland reverted at Jubilee. Levite cities. Levites' houses could always be redeemed and returned during Jubilee. Their surrounding pastures were permanently theirs and could never be sold. Care for the poor. Israelites were commanded to support the poor generously without charging interest or making profit. Lending was an act of mercy, not business. God reminded them, I freed you from Egypt. Don't enslave your own people with debt. Slavery versus servanthood. Poor Israelites who sold themselves into service were to be treated as hired workers, not slaves, and released at Jubilee. Permanent slavery among Israelites was forbidden. Foreign slaves. Non Israelite slaves could be acquired and inherited, though Israel was still cautioned against cruelty and encouraged to treat servants humanely. Redemption of servants. Israelites sold to foreigners retained the right to be redeemed by relatives or by themselves with price calculated by years until Jubilee. Even if not redeemed, they went free in the Jubilee year because ultimately God owns his people, not men. That was a lot. But imagine hearing it as an Israelite. It's revolutionary. This Jubilee concept prevents multi generational property and curbs the rich from accumulating all the land. These still needs to be practiced today, but unfortunately, it would be nice if all these are practiced today. You know what I mean? Like, especially the debt one. Like after 7 years, you get a debt relief pretty much, and then yeah, and a lot of these do redemption of land. You can get your family's land back after the, the 49th year. Once you reach your 49th year. Anyways, so it's a divine reset button for society at least twice a century. It ensures that no matter how bad things get, it's the not too distant future. Your family gets a fresh start. It's like God built in a fail safe against a permanent underclass or unchecked economic inequality. Just about social justice ahead of its time. All right, fun fact corner. Liberty Bell and Jubilee. As mentioned, the American Liberty Bell bears an inscription from Leviticus 25, verse 10. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It was put there in 1752 by people who believe in freedom for captives. And indeed, abolitionists later used the Liberty Bell as a symbol to end slavery, aligning with Jubilee's ethos of liberation. It's fascinating, how Bronze Age law inspired movements millennia later. I feel like this specific thing needs to be addressed again. But anyway, that is it for chapter 25. All right, chapter 26. We are at 53 minutes. We have two chapters left, 26 and 27. Hopefully, I can do this in less than 10 minutes. Anyways, as we near the end of this Leviticus or series, this chapter serves as a grand finale of sorts. God lays out the if then terms of the covenant. Think of it as a contract's fine print. There's a there's a list of wonderful blessings Israel will enjoy if they follow God's commands, and then a much longer, hair-raising list of curses or punishments that will befall them if they break faith. It's basically God saying, here's what's behind door number one and door number two. Choose wisely. So it starts with a brief reminder: no idols, keep my Sabbath, and reverence my sanctuary. That's the core of loyalty to God. Then the blessing section, if everyone's favorite part. So, rain and abundant harvest. I will give you your rains in their season, and the land will yield bumper crops. Threshing seasons will last until grape harvest, and grape harvest will sow harvest till sowing time, meaning you'll have so much produce you're continuously processing it. You shall eat your bread to the full, no more hunger or crop failures. The barns overflow. Another one, peace and safety. I will give peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and none shall make you afraid. Imagine rural folks able to sleep with their doors open, no fear of raiders or wild beasts. God even says he'll remove harmful animals from the land, and the sword of the enemy war won't go through your land. Victory over enemies. If enemies do show up, five of you shall chase 100, and 100 of you shall chase 1,000, 10,000. That's supernatural favor in battle. Enemies will turn tail and run, basically. Growth and covenant love. I will turn to you and make you fruitful and multiply you, and will confirm my covenant with you. Sounds like echoes of Eden and Abraham's promise. Lots of kids, thriving families. It even says you'll have to clear out old stored grain to make room for new. That's how plentiful things will be. God's presence. So here's the climax. I will set my tabernacle among you, and I will walk among you, and you will be your God, and you shall be my people. This is huge. Walk among you harks back to God walking in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. It's like if Israel obeys, they'll experience a slice of paradise regained. God's presence tangible, right there in the midst, and the closeness with Him that fulfills the whole point of the covenant. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt so you would no longer be slaves. I broke the bars of your yoke and made you walk upright. Beautiful imagery. They were once um, bent under slavery. God freed them to stand tall. In essence, stick with me and life will be blessed beyond your dreams. Everyone hearing this is probably grinning ear to ear, thinking, yes, sign us up for that. But Moses then clears his throat because there's the second part, the curses or consequences for disobedience. This part is much longer, as if to emphasize, please, please don't go down this road. The progression is described in stages, each more severe than the last, trying to get Israel's attention if they stray. It's like God saying, and mind you, they always stray. But anyway, it's like God saying, if you don't listen, I'll discipline you, and if you don't listen, I'll up the intensity sevenfold, and so on. Brace yourself, it gets intense. So, stage one, initial warning. God warns that if Israel rejects his laws, terror, disease, and fever will plague them. Their crops will be stolen by enemies, and they will live in fear and defeat, running even when no one chases them. Stage two, escalated discipline. And FYI, for those parents who are listening to this, I I have stages as well with my, disciplining style with my daughter. And I think it's working. But, anyways, stage two, escalated discipline. If they persist in rebellion, God will punish them 7 times over. The sky will be like iron and the ground like bronze. No rain, no crops, and fruitless toil. Stage 3, nature turns hostile. Wild animals will attack, killing children and livestock, leaving the land empty and desolate. Stage 4, war, famine, and disease. If they still refuse to repent, God will send war, pestilence, and siege. Food will be so scarce, then women will share one oven, and bread will be rationed by weight. Stage 5, ultimate judgment. God's fury reaches its peak, starvation so severe God that people will eat their own children. Idolatrous altars and cities will be destroyed. The land will become desolate, shocking even enemies. The people will be scattered among nations, exile as the final curse. While they're gone, the land will finally rest and enjoy the Sabbath they ignored. Survival survivors will live in fear and guilt in foreign lands, trembling even the rustle of a leaf. At this point, everyone's hearing this. Oh, I can't talk anymore. Everyone hearing this might be trembling. The vividness of these curses is meant to be seared into memory. It's like a dire prophecy of what will happen if Israel abandons God. But and this is important, it doesn't end there. God being merciful includes a hopeful epilogue, saying, "But if they confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers, if then their uncircumcised heart is humbled and they accept their guilt," in other words, if in exile they finally repent sincerely, "then I will remember my covenant with Jacob, Israel, and Abraham, and I will remember the land." God's promises that even after all that, if they turn back, He won't utterly destroy them or forget them. Yet for all that, when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not spurn them or abhor them so as to destroy them completely, breaking my covenant with them. For I am the Lord their God, but I will, for their sake, remember the covenant with their ancestors, whom I brought out of Egypt in the sight of the nations, that I might be their God. Essentially, God will not give up on Israel. He might discipline them severely, like a parent allowing wayward child to hit rock bottom, but He holds out the possibility of restoration. There's a lifeline. Repentance leads to restoration. All right, fun fact corner. Sevenfold punishment. So the repetition of punishments 7 times over for disobedience, mentioned multiple times, signifies a complete, full um measure of discipline. Interestingly, in the book of Revelation, we see series of sevenfold judgments. Some see parallels to covenant curses being played out on a global scale. The idea is that God's patience isn't endless. At some point, persistence or persistent rebellion triggers the full weight of justice, but even that is intended to lead to repentance. All right, that is it for chapter 26. All right, last chapter, chapter 27. We have reached the final chapter of Leviticus series. This chapter is like an appendix dealing with a specific topic, how to handle things people vow to God. It might feel a bit detached from the dramatic covenant scene of chapter 26, but it serves a practical manual for dedicating things of oneself to the Lord. Think of it as the frequently asked questions for, like, so you've decided to make a special vow. Here's how to do it properly. In ancient Israel, people might make vows out of devotion or gratitude. For example, "God, if you heal my daughter, I'll dedicate my son to you," or "I'll give the value of my field to the sanctuary," etc., etc. So this chapter outlines a redemption value system for those vows, so everything remains above board and fair. Key points. Valuating persons. If someone vows to dedicate a person to God, not for sacrifice, but for service or as a symbolic giving of their life to God's service, there's a standard monetary value set based on age and gender. Essentially, instead of physically handing someone over to tabernacle service, one would pay a certain amount to the sanctuary treasury, representing that person. The values given are, so if a man is aged 20 to 60, that's valued at 50 shekels of silver. A woman 20 to 60 valued at 30 shekels. Youth 5 to 20 years, male is 20 shekels, female is 10 shekels. Little kids 1 month to 5 years, male 5 shekels, female 3. And then elderly 60 plus, male 15 shekels and female 10 shekels. Now, before anyone yells, why are women valued less? Remember, this isn't about intrinsic worth. It likely reflects the typical oh, can't talk, labor values or support that person could provide to the sanctuary. It's a practical economy based valuation. Also, interestingly, babies and seniors have lower rates, probably because they wouldn't work much. So the idea is the person isn't actually going to work, at the tabernacle. Instead, you fulfill your vow by paying this set amount. If someone is too poor to pay the set value, the priest will assess what they can afford. So there's flexibility and compassion built in. You don't go broke because you made a promise to God in the heat of the moment. Dedicating animals. If someone vows to give an animal to God, if it's if it's a clean animal acceptable for sacrifice. If it's unclean animal, and you dedicated it, you can't sacrifice it. So the priest will assess its value, and the person must either redeem it by paying the value plus 20% on top, um, or the priest can sell it at the price to someone else. The proceeds go to the sanctuary. Essentially, you vow this donkey, either pay up and keep the donkey with an extra 150 for the privilege, or let it be sold to the sanctuary's benefit. um, dedicating house or dedicating houses and lands. So yes, people could even dedicate their house or family field to God. If someone dedicates their house, the priest assesses its market value. If the person later wants to redeem his house, he must pay the value plus 20%. If he doesn't redeem it, presumably the house becomes sanctuary property. If someone dedicates part of their family land, its value is calculated in proportions to the next Jubilee year. Specifically, it gives a formula: 50 shekels of silver per homer of barley seed is the value for a full span until Jubilee. If Jubilee is far off full price, if it's closer, the priest prorates the price by years left. And yes, it's that specific. If the person who dedicated the land ever wants to redeem it, he pays the value plus 20%. If he does redeem it and someone else perhaps bought it in the meantime, then at Jubilee, the land doesn't revert to the original owner. So you kind of get what I'm trying to say here. Um, here's a few more. Firstborn belongs to God anyway. So firstborn animals, if clean, are automatically God's according to earlier law. So you can't dedicate a firstborn. It's already his. No redeeming devoted things. So here's a category of the devoted things. This usually meant things devoted to destruction for God, like in warfare, certain captured items, or even persons that were under a ban. These are ultra holy and cannot be redeemed or sold at all. They're either destroyed or irrevocably given to God. And then there's tithes. Finally, the chapter and book talk about tithes, a tenth of produce and flocks. So crops, a tenth of all the produce of the land is holy to the Lord. This was typically given to the Levites and their portions. Flocks and herds. When counting off every tenth animal from the pen as tithe, you must just take every tenth one that passes under the shepherd's rod. No selective picking. If the tenth one is a scrawny lamb or a prize bull, either way, it's God's. So you can't really pick. So basically, tithe your animal with integrity. Every tenth one, count it off honestly. I can imagine a shepherd lining up sheep, one, two, three, pentaccurate. Off to the priest you go. So the book ends with simply stating, "These are the commandments of the Lord gave Moses for the Israelite on Mount Sinai." So this chapter, in essence, ensures that when people make voluntary religious pledges, they fulfill them in a standard, fair way. It protects both the worshiper and the sanctuary. It's a fitting close for Leviticus. After all the required laws, we get guidance on optional acts of devotion. Yeah, so that's it, Bible nerds. We bid farewell to the Leviticus series, a book that started with sacrifices and ended with promises. What's next? The very last verses of Leviticus have the Israelites still camped at Mount Sinai. They've received this huge download of divine instruction. The book of Numbers is going to be next. So we will pick it up, the story from there, or from the book of Numbers. After nearly a year camped at Sinai, it's time to back up the tabernacle, do a head count. That's why it's called numbers, and hit the road through the wilderness. But are they ready? Will they remember all these laws when put to the test? Spoiler: the wilderness journeys will be a wild ride of its own, with rebellions, miracles, and yes, some fiery serpents and a talking donkey cameo. Like, really. We'll see the Israelites march out in formation only to stumble through lessons of faith and folly. So, stay tuned for Numbers episode 1 next week. Thank you for listening to Chapters and Chuckles by Kaye. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow, subscribe, leave a comment. You can catch new episodes only on YouTube. Well, on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Until next time, keep laughing, and as always, stay curious, everyone.